Hey everyone, how's it going? And welcome back to another episode of Bound to Talk Football. I am your host, Blake Walker, and alongside of me, Ian Hurley. Welcome to the podcast, Ian.
In case you didn't know, Bound is not run by a bunch of just old people. We are your average college students. We live in the dorms just like everyone else.
Yes, absolutely. My TV's got like a Zen thing going on. I have a setting on my TV where like
we cleaned up the background pretty well though. It looks okay.
Yeah. You got
presentable
your background. You're at Iowa State.
I am.
So you're an Iowa State student. You're a freshman. You went to Johnston High School. Have you been on the podcast?
Correct.
Like I think you've been. You on a volleyball part last year?
I was never on the podcast for the state basketball. I did our preview show for state basketball, but I haven't been on the podcast.
So people have seen you before. We grow at massive rates, so that's no surprise. He's an Iowa State guy. I'm an Iowa guy. I do have my Hawkeye sweatshirt on right now, and then Ian has his
other side. There you go.
Bringing back the side logos, mascot logos, which I agree are really cool. We'll talk about the Cy-Hawk game at the end. But, so we're in week 2. Ian is with me today because he's just coming off the bench. Paul has strep. So
Paul got put on IR for the week.
I know. He got put on IR. So week 2, he just couldn't hang in there. But, boy, what a week 1. We'll talk about – we're not going to, recap the games, but we're going to talk about the games because we're going to be talking about what's going on in week number 2. We're recording this on Thursday afternoon. The plan is to upload it pretty much right after. So we'll just be catching in before the beginning of Thursday night football, both in the NFL and on high school.
Yep.
So I guess, that's fun. Well, quickly, let me just start out by saying our Thursday night games, just because I want to get them in there. Clarksville takes on Dunkerton. That's at Clarksville. GMG takes on Janesville. Sioux City North is against Lamar's. That's at Morningside College. Tripola takes on Gladbrook-Rhinebeck, and then Roosevelt faces Ottumwa. That's realistically your best game of the night. Roosevelt took down Lincoln 49-16. Ottumwa beat Keokuk 47-26. I tell you what, this could be a really good game. Just kind of looking at the stats.
Roosevelt did look explosive last week. Obviously, you're not going to see the highest end of competition against Des Moines Lincoln, but Roosevelt offense did look explosive. They showed off big playability. So it'll be a fun game for a little Thursday night game.
You want a crazy stat? Ottumwa only passed the ball 4 times. Matthew Mitchell was 1 of 4 for 7 yards. But yet Cameron Minari ran for 32 carries, 325 yards, and 5 touchdowns. But the other end of that, Eddie Fulton of Roosevelt ran the ball 13 times for 336 yards. So almost a third of what Cameron Minari or whatever ran carries-wise, and he still beat him in yardage. Eddie Fulton is a dog. So it should be a good one tonight. I think Roosevelt could beat a public school. I think they could beat a metro school this year.
Yeah.
I do believe
they'll definitely have a shot to start off the season 2-0, which is the best start that you can hope for. And they got a chance in every game that they play in. If you have an offense that can score that many points, then you have a shot in every game. Defense will come and go depending on the opponent. And so if you have an offense that is that explosive like Roosevelt's is, they do have a shot in every game they play in.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to see. I truly do believe they can beat one of the metro teams this year on their schedule. I truly believe that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Ian, let's talk about this week. We'll just kind of go in depth on what we're seeing, what's going to happen this week. Centennial takes on Ames. Ankeny Centennial was very good last week. Obviously, the win over Ankeny was a astounding victory. Hey, look, they finally put in stats. How about that?
There you go.
And I tell you what, the thing about Centennial is that they're very, as of this week, or as of last week, very one-dimensional. Chase Kluver was only 4 of 6 for 12 yards. He did throw a passing touchdown, but it was Braden Jackson on the ground. You think that's like a worry about Centennial? I'm not saying they're going to lose this game. Ames really struggled against Waukee in the rebuilding year, but overall, Do we got to see the passing game work just a
you
little?
don't want to see an offense that is as one-dimensional as they were last week. Obviously, it did not matter last week. The defense stood up Ankeny for the entire second half, and Ankeny's offense couldn't get anything going. So the run worked last week, and Ames is a team that it was close through a quarter against Waukee, but last week against Waukee killed them through the air. Yeah. And then this week will be the complete opposite, and Centennial is going to try to do everything on the ground. So a complete different look that Ames is getting playing against Centennial versus playing against Waukee. I wouldn't go as far to say as I'm concerned with what Centennial's doing, but when you get to play later in the season, you're playing against the West Des Moines Valleys, the Dowling Catholics, Southeast Polk. You're going to need to at least have the threat to be able to throw the ball. You can't go into every single play, and the defense knows that you want to run the ball every single down.
Right. I think it's a key part of the game. That's for sure. Centennial and Ames, this will be the 8th time in the history of this, not really a rivalry, but they've played quite a bit. 2013, 2014, 15, 16, 17, 2020, and then 2023. Ames won the very first meeting between these two teams when Ankeny Centennial became a school, and ever since then it has been Centennial who has won every single game. So should be a good one between the Jags and the little Cyclones. I guess we'll throw out our predictions for it. I say Centennial wins. I think you're probably.
I would go Centennial big.
All right, there you
go. Centennial big in that game.
There you go. Iowa City High takes on Iowa City Liberty. City High went over to Joliet and faced one of the best teams in the state of Illinois. Joliet Catholic Academy lost 50-22. I don't really see much about that. I mean, it's awesome that they went over there and played.
Yeah.
Bobby Bacon still had a great game, 16 of 22, 222 yards. I think it was just Iowa City Liberty on the other end, my friend, is that there wasn't a lot of defense, but, man, the offense looked good in a 56-45 win over City West.
Exactly. And I think it's cool to watch teams from the state of Iowa go play teams from other states, but that was not a good representation of the state of Iowa last week. Obviously, Joliet's a powerhouse in Illinois, but that was a game that was 50-6 in the fourth quarter, and then City High ended up getting 2 late touchdowns. Liberty obviously was in a more competitive game last week. They got some experience in a tighter ball game, and their offense was doing basically whatever they wanted against City West last week. The Iowa City Liberty defense did get 2 interceptions against City West last week that really changed that ball game, and they ended up winning it by 11. So if Liberty is able to get a takeaway or 2 in this game, I think it's another one that they could pull away against a fellow Iowa City school.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, since 2018, Liberty has won the series 4-2. Obviously, we remember the big one at Kinnick Stadium a couple years ago. That was like a shocker. I mean, Liberty came out of nowhere. Same thing last year. Liberty took care of business. So I don't know. This is a really tough one. I think Bobby Bacon's going to be good again, but the fact that City High just couldn't get the ground running. Now, granted, Joliet is a whole different ball game. I don't know, man. This is a really, really tough game to pick, in my opinion. Liberty just looked really good against Iowa City West. We don't know how good Iowa City West is going to be. We know they have athletes. I think I got to go with the Little Hawks, though. I think because it's at home, I think that also, the crowd's going to be up and rolling here for City High. I think I'm going to roll with the Little Hawkeyes here on this one.
I'm going to be on the opposite side. I'm going to go with Liberty this week. Their second straight week playing another Iowa City school, so they got a taste of a rivalry last week. They'll play another rivalry this week. And, City High, Joliet is obviously top-end Illinois type school. But when you just get beat down like that in a game, how they did, and you were down over 40 points in the fourth quarter, confidence is a little lower this week. practices, feeling a little tougher throughout the entire week. And Liberty their offense is clicking on all cylinders going into this one. So I feel like they'll be ready to go this week, even though they have to go to City High. I think they'll be ready to go. I'm going to go with Liberty.
There you go. Southeast Polk stays home. Excuse me. Southeast Polk stays home and faces the Ankeny Hawks. I believe this one will be on MC22. This is a story of two teams that got beat in week one. Well, I mean, this is one that's like, all right, who responds the most? This is going to be a really interesting game. Southeast Polk fell just short to Valley. It's the first loss to a team not named Ankeny since 2019. Couple interesting things there at the end of that game. I was watching the IHSAA officials referee recap for the week, where I think they just send out to the officiating crews and be like, all right, here's some calls that we need to tighten up on. Here's a couple things that we've never seen before. Here's whatever. And the game sealing interception by Zay Robinson was a pass interference against Sam Zelenovich. Does that change the game? Obviously, yes, it does. It's unfortunate what happened, but it was just nice that the association came out and said, hey, here's what happened. Next time, pass interference. Obviously, it stinks. But either way, you got an Ankeny team that really got embarrassed defensively against Ankeny Centennial, and you got a Southeast Polk team that realistically likes to throw the ball, but I don't think we know their identity yet. And Ankeny couldn't run the ball for anything. Yeah. I mean, 1.5 yards per carry, 17 carries, 26 yards. I just feel like after what we saw last week from Ankeny, it's like, man, you gotta step it up this week, or else you're going to be in the Valley territory where you start the season really rough and you're going to be really trying to regroup.
Big out of a hole. Yeah. Early on last week's game against Centennial, we were watching it live together, and Ankeny was throwing the ball. They looked good throwing the ball, and they were moving it down the field, and we're like, okay, Ankeny looks legit right now. But then late second quarter, something changed a little bit in the entire second half. They just couldn't get stuff going and didn't score the entire second half. And it honestly looked like two different football teams from the first quarter and a half of that game versus the last 2.5 quarters of that game. It looked like two different teams. Whereas Southeast Polk, you don't know exactly what you're going to get from them week in, week out, but they have that championship culture from the last – obviously, they've won the last 3, but you have the championship culture from the last 5-6 years even. And they look good last week against a team that is probably, you could easily say, is the most talented team in the state of Iowa. And they took them down to the wire, obviously in an unfortunate way how the game ended, but they played them the entire game and played them tough the whole way. And they get another game at their home stadium, and I don't see it going differently than, I guess, how they played Valley last week. I think they'll kind of do what they want to do. They're well coached, and I think they'll come away with a win somewhere between 7 to 10 points against Ankeny this week.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I just think Southeast Polk, for how good Valley is on paper, I mean, they almost beat them. And then if they would have beaten them last week, we would have been like, dang. I mean, nothing has changed. Obviously, the roster has flipped on its head, but clearly they're just the same old Southeast Polk. But, yeah, I agree with you. I think Southeast Polk takes care of business, and it kind of will leave Ankeny be like, all right, you got to really pick things up here. Got to regroup because it's not an easy schedule for the Hawks.
Yep.
So I think that's one to watch. So I guess you could count that has become a rivalry in the last couple of years. We got another rivalry here. It's almost rivalry week when you think about it.
Whenever the CIML schools play against each other, you can call anything a rivalry.
It has just been one of those things that we've seen. Waukee will take on Waukee Northwest, the second iteration of this rivalry here on the gridiron. Waukee Northwest stunned Waukee last year. This was Waukee's game to lose, and then they lost it. Waukee Northwest came all the way back and beat the Warriors. This year, though, it might be a little bit different. Waukee Northwest struggled a little bit against Johnston, had a big kick return called back, or a big return, or a big play called back. I know that was big, but Waukee takes care of Ames. Ames is not Waukee Northwest, but Waukee Northwest returned not a lot. I mean, they have a lot of young talent. Maverick Inman goes across the way and now plays for Waukee. I just feel like the sting of last year for Waukee really hurt. And the way Beckett Baker slung the pill against Ames, 17-22, 321 yards and 3 touchdowns. On paper, this says Waukee should win this game pretty easy. But I think about this game like an Ankeny Centennial game. This will be a very good football game.
Yep. And with a rivalry game, it's never going to be easy. One team could be so significantly better than the other one, but because when they play against each other, there's just something that goes on that it's never going to be just an easy game. And even though Northwest lost last week, Waukee cruised to a win. Northwest played against Johnston. Waukee played against Ames. Those are two different levels of opponents. And, that changes things in some ways, but also winning the way that Waukee did, again, that's just such a big confidence booster going into an entire week of practice, going into this game where they already wanted to get revenge from last year. Now they're riding off a huge win. Their offense is feeling it. They're ready to go for this week. And I think it's one that Waukee wins this year. And I would say somewhere between that 10 to 14 point range. Northwest, their offense showed signs last week, but they never had anything consistently going. And in the pass game, they didn't create too much. It was more so the receivers or the running back having the ball in their hands and they created something versus the pass game actually creating something against the defense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Waukee wins. I think it's going to be a good game. It says it's at Timberline School football field. I'm just looking, and I'm like, this is not.
I'm pretty sure that's just Waukee.
Yeah, I'm looking at the satellite, and I'm like, I don't recognize this. I don't know. That's kind of weird. I don't know. I'll have to check that. I'm calling that game, so that'll be. I need to make sure I go to the right game. I know it's going to be a Waukee home game because I know they went to Waukee Northwest last year, but. Yeah, I'm not really sure. All right, another big one, Valley Dowling. This is the rivalry that everybody just loves to watch. Valley wins last week. Quarterback play for Drake DeGroot was really fun to watch. Parker DePhillips was really good. Rashad Davis did not play, I don't believe. Let me just check. I don't think he did. Yeah, Rashad Davis did not play, so it was Ian Middleton. So both teams didn't really run the ball well by any means, but Dowling gets a big win over Cedar Rapids Kennedy 24-12. This is just going to be a classic Dowling Valley football game, and Dowling looked decent. I mean, I really say, yeah, they looked really good against Cedar Rapids Kennedy for how much they didn't return. Dowling has dominated this series dating back to at least 2008 when it's in our bound statistics, 15-8. Valley won in 2022 by 1 point. Obviously, that was the dome game, wasn't it? That was the overtime game. And then obviously won in 2019, 29-22. But overall, it's just been Dowling. This is going to be fun, Ian. I think you saw a lot from Valley. It's just, can they ride the high and go and beat crosstown rival?
And it's such an emotional win when you win late like that. You score with 30 seconds left. You get the late game interception to seal it. And you beat the team that is the main target or has been the main target for the last 4 or 5 years. The one that's circled on their calendar is Southeast Polk for the last 4 or 5 years. They get them week 1. They beat them week 1 as being ranked the number 1 team going into the year. So you have to be feeling good about yourself going into this. But in a game that wasn't talked about as much, it was also a big matchup with how much people like Kennedy going into the year. Dowling dominated that game. They were up 24-0, and then you watch them just kind of let off the gas a little bit. They give up some late game points. Doesn't affect the result at all. Still come out with a very easy win relatively, and they get their running back this week as well. And so it's really just a toss-up going into the week, I would say.
I'm going to roll with Dowling Catholic. I think I think Valley's great. I think this could be a dome matchup easily. hopefully we don't see it in the playoffs or before we get to the Dome. You just never know. But I truly do think this is going to be a phenomenal football game, as it always is when these two teams meet. But regular season, as of recently, Dowling has taken care of business against Valley, and I think it continues. I like Dowling Catholic to win this game.
I'm going to agree with you on the pick, really. Valley's not a team, the last few years at least, that we've seen cares all too much about the regular season or what happens in the regular season. Obviously, they make their postseason runs. They show up for the big games, and obviously this is a big game. But I think Dowling looked, even though Valley beat Southeast Polk, who's might be the better team over Kennedy. They're probably fairly comparable, though. But the way that Dowling looked last week, even without their running back, I think they'll be ready to go this week. Their coaching is going to have them ready to go. Their culture, again, going to have them ready to go. And I think they'll win technically a home game for them, even though it's in Valley Stadium. I think Dowling beats Valley this week. But I'm sure this is a matchup that we'll see at some point in late October, early November.
Yeah, I think so too. It's just going to be a fun game to watch overall. Last one we're going to talk about, and then we'll just give quick thoughts on the other ones. But Cedar Falls will go to Johnston, another fun regular season matchup. Cedar Falls gets a big, impressive win over Prairie, 35-13. Johnston holds off Waukee Northwest 28-17. Cedar Falls took care of Johnston last year in a 35-21 victory. This was a game for Cedar Falls at least, they don't pass the ball very well. Will Nuss struggled to pass the ball, 11 of 25, 159 yards. Realistically, this game will probably be won on the ground, if I had to say. Devarian Clark, 19 carries, 213 yards, 4 touchdowns so far to start the year. And then D'Angelo Barku, 25 carries, 140 yards, 2 touchdowns. Really could come down to defense at the end of the day, honestly, the way this thing's playing out.
Yeah, and I if you just box score watch from last week, obviously Cedar Falls is going to look slightly more impressive just box score watching. But if you go back and you watch some of the parts of the game against Northwest last week, Will Nuss looked really, really good last week. He showed off the arm talent. He showed off his ability to make plays outside of the pocket. And really, he had 2 or 3 free touchdowns that were dropped by wide receivers.
Yep.
And obviously that's not going to show in the box score. It's just going to go down as another incompletion. But he made some plays that didn't end up being big plays, but he looked really impressive last week, even though his completion percentage isn't going to show that. And I think Barku's talent out of the backfield running the ball, but then they can also use him in the passing game a little bit. I think that helps them be a little bit more creative. You watch their offense I think they looked more creative last week than they did for most of the year last year. The playbook looked a little bit more open. You saw more movement from wide receivers and running backs and whatnot. And you saw they like to play the boundaries a lot. And I think that plays to their advantage when you have such speed at running back, but then they also have on the outside Tino Day with a lot of speed as well.
I think I got to roll with the Dragons. 10.5 tackles for loss last week. That's no joke. They stopped the run a lot better, it felt like, for Waukee Northwest. And Cedar Falls is just kind of one-dimensional, it looks like, just based on the running attack, at least through week 1. I like the Dragons. I think the Dragons can pull out the win. Obviously, you're going to be biased because you went to Johnston. But I think Johnston can win this game here against Cedar Falls.
But really, I'm going to go with Johnston this week. But if you look at Cedar Falls as a team, I think they're one of the more underrated teams in 5A right now. Their next 4-game stretch is against Johnston, Ankeny Centennial, Iowa City Liberty, and Linn-Mar. If they somehow go 3-1 in those 4 games, they are set to go into state again this year with a little bit of momentum, probably going in as a 6-3, 7-2 sort of team if they can go 3-1 in that stretch. And I wouldn't sleep on them as a team later in the year, but this week I think Johnston wins. Coach Helgeson, the defensive coordinator, will have them ready to go on the defense side of the ball. He's one of the best coordinators in the entire state. Jacob Helgeson at middle linebacker makes plays all over the field. I think the defense will be good enough. Will hold Cedar Falls to 14, 17 points, somewhere in there. And the offense will have it going enough, and Johnston will win this game by a touchdown.
There you go. A couple other games, just kind of scrolling through. Cedar Rapids Kennedy takes on Pleasant Valley. That'll be a big game. Two teams that are coming off losses. Pleasant Valley falls just short to Bettendorf. Bettendorf takes on Davenport West. Sergeant Bluff Luton faces Sioux City East. And Linn-Mar takes on Cedar Rapids Washington. So a couple of really good games. Lincoln takes on East. Des Moines East got the win last week against Des Moines North. Good for the Scarlets. So that's your 5A stuff. We'll jump down to Class 4A here. We'll start out at the top, our very top of the page at least. ADM will take on Winterset. ADM, a slog fest of a game, a 13-8 win over the Newton Cardinals. That's a big win, if you ask me. I thought Newton was going to be – I mean, I still think they can be very good this year, but I thought Newton would beat ADM, considering all the ADM lost. These are two teams that, felt like they kind of had a decent week one. I'm sure Newton or ADM's obviously very happy to get away with the win against Newton. Winterset took it to Creston. I watched a lot of this game. Creston obviously lost a lot. They're not the team that they were last year, but a 31-6 win. Hunter Lyon, 203 yards passing. Hank Wilmus, 179 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns. The one thing that really stands out to me, Ian, just box score watching, ADM somehow won this game against Newton, and it really just statistically they don't set themselves up well against a Winterset team that looked really good in week number 1.
And I think it's another one of those scenarios where, well, we talked about it in a couple of the 5A games earlier. One team has a big win against a worse opponent. It's like our Waukee Northwest matchup. Yep. You get a big win against a little bit worse opponent, or you have a close, tight game against a better opponent. And obviously ADM, I think the experience in the tighter game will help ADM in this game, but the way that game just went, it doesn't impress you as much, and you don't feel as good about it as if you just go out and you just very easily beat a team. Right. But I think having the experience playing against Newton last week versus playing against Creston last week, I think that'll help them out a little bit. And I think it's a game that ADM ends up winning by 3 to 6 points.
Yeah, this is a tough one, man. I think Winterset did look good. I mean, and I know Creston lost a lot, but the ADM defense really showed up. 3 interceptions. They threw on themselves, but 3 picks on the defensive side of the ball. 2 sacks for Winterset, 7 total tackles for loss. I'll give the nod to the Huskies just by a very small margin. This looks like it could be another 15-12 game or something like that. It sure feels like it could be one of those type of games. But I'm excited to see what happens between Winterset and ADM. That one kicks off at 7 o'clock at ADM High School. Let's see. Scrolling down here through a couple more. Carroll and Gilbert. I guess we'll just go to our very next one. Gilbert somehow, some way, came back and defeat Dallas Center Grimes. A rally cry, if you will. The Tigers ran the ball like crazy. Oh my gosh! I'm just looking at this game. This is gonna be a fight. Gilbert and Carroll combined last week were 5 of 12 passing. Combined, and a total of just over 50 yards passing. Holy cow. 368 yards rushing for Gilbert, 331 yards rushing for Carroll. This was a close game last year, 21-14. Ian, I know everybody talked about Gilbert last year. Went 6-0, lost the final 3. I'd love to see him pass the ball a little bit more, but I feel like we're in for another close one here in this game.
And, I mean, I don't want to be disrespectful in any way, but you could pretty much call this game Carroll against Will Hawthorne.
Yes.
And Will Hawthorne, obviously, you look at his running stats. He ran the ball 40 times last week
Gilbert ran the ball 62 times total.
Yeah. He ran the ball himself 40 times last week, scored 4 times on the ground. He was also the team's leading passer. He was 1 for 1 for a 25-yard completion, and that was their team's leading passer. And you'd like to see them be able to do something else other than just handing Will Hawthorne the ball and saying, go figure it out yourself.
Right.
But if it works, it works. And Dallas Center Grimes is not a bad team by any means.
No.
And so
impressed me last week.
Yeah, being able to do that against DCG, a road game at DCG at that, I think that's pretty impressive. And I think it's some that they can use going into this week, depending on how Will Hawthorne is feeling. If he's a little banged up, maybe this goes the other way. But if he's feeling good going into the game, I think Gilbert wins this one.
I think we have another close one. I'm with you. DCG is better than Greene County. And, Carroll beat Greene County 34-21. Not that that's a bad game. Statistically, defensively, Carroll really played well on the defensive side of the ball. But it's whatever defense breaks first. And both teams gave up. Gilbert gave up 28. Carroll gave up 21. I'll take Gilbert, but just barely. I think Carroll is going to be rocking. This is going to be a very fun game. I'm excited to see how those guys play that one out. That's going to be a fun football game for sure. All right, who else we got on here? Our game of the week: Indianola and Norwalk in Class 4A. Boy, this is going to be a good game. I got a feeling this is going to be a really good game. History says it goes so even. 4-4 is this rivalry since 2016. Norwalk coming off a win against Carlisle 35-7. Indianola rallies late, really, to beat Urbandale 21-17. Both these teams ran the ball. Norwalk ran the ball for 290 yards. When's the last time you saw that they didn't have a gunslinger at quarterback? This is going to be a good one. I love to see Eli Robbins. He is going to be fun to watch for Norwalk. And then Indianola has their own dog in Jake Pontier, 141 yards, 3 touchdowns last week. I think we're in for another good one here, Ian.
Yeah, I think this, rightfully so, is the game of the week here in 4A. Indianola, they get the 5A win last week. They beat Urbandale. How impressive that win is, time will tell. We don't really know. We'll see Urbandale play against some other 5A schools to really be able to tell what they look like this year. But you get a win over a bigger school. Momentum will be riding high. Obviously, they looked great on the ground game last week. You'd like to see them open it up a little bit. They were 10 of 16 in the air last week, it's good, but you'd like to see them open up a little bit more, I guess, on the offensive side of the ball. And not to say it's a different story on the other side, though. Norwalk is the exact same way. You'd like to see them open up the passing game a little bit more. Obviously, they look great on the ground, but also 2 of the 6 completions that they did have on offense were to the running back. And so they only had 4 passes caught by wide receivers last week. You'd like to see them open it up a little bit more, but really going into this, it's a 50-50 toss-up.
I'm looking at it right now. I'm going to make a pick. I just got to figure out what to roll with here. Again, we don't know about Urbandale yet. It's just kind of what it is. Indianola was trailing and came back and won that game. Last year, it was Norwalk 21-14. I think you're going to see the exact same score. Literally, I bet you do see the exact same score this week. I'm going to roll with, where's this game at? Indianola? I don't know, man. They run the ball a lot, which is just not like these two teams. Eli Robbins is going to be tough. Pontier is going to be tough. Give me Norwalk. Barely. Give me Norwalk. Barely in this one. I think it's going to be a heck of a game. I was saying in my head, I'm just going to go with the opposite, whatever you say. So I'm going to go with Indianola this week.
Offenses looked very similar in what they did against very different opponents last week. But I think Indianola's defense will make some sort of stop late or hold up Norwalk enough, and Indianola will win this game.
I think it's going to be a fun one. A couple of these games, just letting everybody know, they will be cross-class games. So we'll probably say a 4A team taking on a 3A team. That's just kind of how it goes when it kind of mixes together. I think another big one to circle here, Clear Creek Amana takes on Solen. The Clippers, very, very good last week in the win over Marion, a 28-3 win. It was Solen who took down Assumption 33-7. Solen has won every single game since 2010 against Clear Creek Amana, at least according to Bound. It could be glitched a little bit, but 5-0. For the Spartans, who just looked really good, 15-24, 210 yards for Ty Bell, the senior. Clear Creek Amana did not pass the ball very well. I mean, 8-14, 67 yards. More of what they did on the ground is what I look for. 6 total tackles for loss, 1 sack for Solen, 3 tackles for loss for Clear Creek Amana, 0 sacks. This is going to be an interesting game if the Clippers want to prove how legit they are, because Solen is easily one of the favorites in Class 3A. History says, though, Solen should take care of business here. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say Solen wins this game. But I think it's going to be a fun one.
And I'm going to agree with you on this one. I think Solen does end up winning this game. By how much, we'll see. But I think Solen does win. They had very similar wins last week. They both very easily won against a team that is worse than they are. But if you look into it a little bit, Solen's offense is very balanced in what they did last week. They could kind of just do whatever they wanted. The defense didn't let up at all. They looked very good the entire time. Clear Creek Amana's leading rusher was the quarterback last week, and so he's kind of doing it all himself. I think Solen will be able to figure that out enough, and they'll end up winning this game.
I think it's going to be a fun one, though. I think it's going to be good. I'm excited to see how that one plays out. We'll deep dive into 2 more, and then we'll just kind of run you through what else is happening in 4A. West Delaware taking on Decorah. Decorah with the win last week over Waukee, 33-0. West Delaware falls short to Western Dubuque, 21-13. Paul and I were pretty high on Decorah, 5-9, passing 119 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then ran for 249 yards. Brent Yankovic struggled in the air for West Delaware in his first game, 9 of 21, 88 yards, still ran for 124 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think my biggest thing with West Delaware, Brent Yankovic has to be on. If he's not on, the Hawks are going to have a hard time. But Decorah, I mean, that's a tough defense. And when you think of Decorah, you think of defense.
Yeah, and it's not like Western Dubuque is a bad team at all. Western Dubuque is a very good team. And so it's not a bad loss that West Delaware had last week, but just kind of the way that they lose the game, the passing game never got going really. And quarterback Yankovic was running the ball pretty well, but obviously his passing game never got going, which makes the offense too one-dimensional. And against a Decorah team that's known for defense, toughness, they'll be ready to go. I think Decorah will win this game simply because they're going to be able to slow down the passing game enough, make West Delaware more one-dimensional, and I think Decorah wins the game.
Yeah, I like it. I do too. I think 6 sacks defensively for Decorah. Both teams ran the ball 37 times last week, and Decorah had 249 yards rushing, and West Delaware only had 167. Now, granted, Waukee is not West Delaware, but yes, I think that'll be a fun one to keep up with. And then finally, I think this is our 3A game of the week, but technically a 4A versus 3A school. Williamsburg taking on Xavier. Xavier started a sophomore quarterback. What is Coach Schulte doing over there? That's like, I never see that. Oh, my goodness. I'm just looking at some of these stats. Williamsburg took care of business against West Branch. Xavier took care of business against Waverly Shell Rock. It was a close game, but Xavier comes out on top. Cash Parks, sophomore quarterback for Xavier, 11 of 22, 101 yards. Grant Hawker of Williamsburg, 11 of 19, 264 yards and 6 touchdowns. Race Heitman had 5 catches, 3 touchdowns, 121 yards. He also led the team in tackles. This was a game last year. This was an insane game. 21-20, Williamsburg won. If you remember, that was the big we picked against Williamsburg and everybody picked against Williamsburg, and then Williamsburg went out and won the game. This is now a home game for the Raiders. I know Xavier, but I just can't pick against Williamsburg right now. They are just an electric team offensively. And I know Xavier is Xavier. I know that. But they're young. They're still learning. I think Williamsburg should take care of business here. Also, these two teams did not run the ball well at all, really. Xavier, I don't know how Xavier won. I mean, Xavier did not look great. So give me Williamsburg.
Really, last week in that game against Waverly Shell Rock, though, neither team looked good.
No,
right?
It was not.
I don't know if it's as much of, Xavier didn't look that good. They won the game, but they didn't look that good. But we could say the same thing about WSR. So I think going into this game, though, I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to go with Williamsburg and how they look. They look dominant. They didn't lose a step at all from what they were doing last year. And obviously, big turnover, losing guys to the next level for Williamsburg. But they still look good. Obviously looked great last week. Didn't look like they lost a step at all. And I think it's gonna be obviously another close game, just like it was last year. But I think they get another close win over Xavier.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a good one to watch. A couple other games to keep your eye out on. North Scott goes to Waverly Shell Rock. This is gonna be a fun one. I think North Scott took care of business last week. Waverly Shell Rock obviously fell short to Xavier. We'll see if the Go Hawks defense can continue to shine in a game where North Scott sets themselves up well. Western Dubuque will take on Wahlert Catholic. That's a game between two 1-0s. Wahlert Catholic and Western Dubuque do not pass the ball. It was a run-heavy game for both those two teams. I did see Wahlert Catholic's quarterback was 3 of 3 for like 79 yards and a touchdown, so good for him. Grinnell goes to Bondurant. Bondurant blows a 35-7 lead at halftime to North Polk. North Polk comes all the way back and defeats the Blue Jays. Grinnell now has to go off to a very angry Bondurant team. And Grinnell beat Center Point Urbana last week. Really good quarterback play. And Brock Heischman had a really good game at wide receiver. Grinnell will have a tough uphill battle to climb. And then Newton Dallas Center Grimes. Circle that one. I think that's going to be another fun one. Keep an eye on that. Two teams that lost very close games that are going to be very hungry to pick up some wins in week number 2. So it's going to be a fun one. Fun couple of games in Class 4A. We'll jump down to Class 3A and see what we can find, scrolling through a couple of these. Obviously, we mentioned quite a few of some really good football games because they kind of cross classes here. Mount Vernon will take on Union. Union picked up the win over Appleton Parkersburg last week, a 14-0 win. Mount Vernon with the 44-6 win over Monticello. I'm just looking at this one. Union, Andrew Sadler, 2 of 7, 92 yards and a touchdown. Nice. Had himself a game. Kellen Haverback, wow, 10 of 17, 219 yards, a touchdown. He also ran for a touchdown. Cooper Hurd. Just quick looking at this one, I think Mount Vernon should take care of business here. Boy, Union. Ugh, that's a rough game, but
I mean, that's definitely not a game that you're going to sit down and go back and watch. Union wins the game in a shutout against Appleton Parkersburg. But
Appleton Parkersburg has been pretty good the last couple.
It's not a bad win, but you're not going to sit down and be like, this is a great win week 1. We're ready to go going into the next week. Versus what Mount Vernon did last week. You feel really good about what you did last week, and you carry that going into this week. And I think they'll take care of business this week. And, Union, hopefully they find something more on the offensive side of the ball this week. But I think Mount Vernon takes care of business here.
Check out another good one. Burlington takes on Washington. Burlington got a huge win over Fort Madison. I believe it was their head coach's first career game coaching. Got the big win over the Bloodhounds. Washington gets the 21-14 win over Oskey. Take a look at the stats on this thing. Burlington, 3 of 9, 56 yards passing. They threw a pick, but they run for 372 yards. Washington, 19 of 23 passing, 153 yards, 3 touchdowns. And then they ran the ball 30 times for 31 yards. You can do the math on how many yards per attempt. This is a classic. What wins, rushing game or passing game in this one for Washington and Burlington? Give me your pick, Ian. Who you think?
I mean, really, though, you look at it and you say rushing game versus passing game, but Washington's passing game, while they went 19 for 23, it's not fully there.
No.
When you're completing 19 passes and you're only throwing for 150 yards, you're doing some little dump offs to the running back. You're doing some nice drag routes from a slot or a tight end or something like that. And you're just slowly just kind of chewing the clock away, and you're winning a game last week, obviously, but you're trying to just kind of shorten the game a little bit versus what Burlington did last week is dominant, and they did it with multiple different players too. They're going to throw different options at you. They run the ball for 372 yards. The leading rusher only had 155 of them. So you're getting a bunch of different looks from them. You know that they want to run the ball, but you're going to get different looks from different players. And I think Burlington ends up winning this game against Washington.
I was just about to say that. I think Burlington gets away with this one. This has been a pretty good game the last couple of years. The last 2 years, it's been fun. Washington's taken both. But, yeah, give me the blood or give me the Greyhounds. I think Burlington takes care of business here. It gets the big win over Washington. Just kind of looking through the rest of these, I think that's really all I wanted to circle for 3A at least, or 4A at least. We'll jump down to 3A here. Or we are in 3A. What am I trying to say? We'll do this one here while we have it. Nevada takes on Roland Story. The Cubs get the win week 1 over West Marshall. Roland Story takes down South Tama 47-0. My uncle is Nevada's assistant coach, so I had a good chat with him this past weekend about how they played. Quarterback play was not phenomenal for Nevada, but still got the job done because Anthony Eaton had 23 carries for 206 yards and 5 total touchdowns. Roland Story, 11 of 17, 122 yards, 4 touchdowns for Sam Knoll. And then Fiston Carlson, 16 carries, 101 yards, and 1 touchdown. I tell you what, very even. I mean, passing-wise, 4 interceptions for Nevada is really – that's astounding. Like, that really sticks out. Roland Story, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. They both run the ball really well. This is at Roland Story. I don't know, man. I think it's going to be a little bit closer than I think some people think. That's why it's one of our games of the week.
Yeah, and you look at the past results, obviously, series dominated by Nevada. But looking at what they did last week, if Nevada turns the ball over 4+ times again, Roland Story is going to win this game.
Yeah.
You cannot turn the ball over 4+ times against good opponents and expect to win football games. Obviously, your defense came up big last week, still only gave up 7 points, turning the ball over that many times. So the defense looks good, and the defense will be ready to go again. But you can't do that as you start to play against better opponents. Obviously, Roland Story's offense looked great last week. So with the offense looking good, and if they're starting in great field position or even on Nevada's side of the field, they're going to take advantage of that. With that being said, I think Nevada will clean some things up. I think Nevada will win this game, but it's going to be a lot closer than what the past few matchups have been.
I agree. I think Nevada wins. Like you said, I think it's going to be close. So keep an eye out. I think that'll be a good one. Nevada and Roland Story. That's why it's one of our games of the week. So shout out to those guys. I think we're in for a good one. All right, Ian, we're going to jump down to Class 2A. Just kind of looking through a couple games here. This is what it is. It's off the cuff. You know, we prep sometimes we don't. Our 2A game of the week is Nevada versus Roland Story because Roland Story is a 2A team. The first big game that jumps off the page to me, at least, is when I scroll down a little bit. Van Meter will take on Des Moines Christian. Some people are saying we got to keep an eye on Des Moines Christian. Van Meter gets the win over Underwood. It was an ugly game. Jay Haley, 9 of 18, 151 yards and 1 touchdown. Garrett Cole ran the ball fine at 16 carries, 78 yards. Des Moines Christian, Jet Each, what a name, Jet Each, 13 of 20, 173 yards, 3 touchdowns passing. Davis Tokheim, A sophomore, 9 carries, 109 yards for 2 touchdowns. Pella Christian is not the team that they have been in recent past. I know that. But I don't know. I think Des Moines Christian could give Van Meter a little bit of the run here. I'm just saying. I'm not saying this is an easy win for Van Meter. I think Des Moines Christian can make things interesting. I'm still going to go with Van Meter, but I think Des Moines Christian can make it interesting.
I agree 100%. This is not a game that they're just going to cruise through, and you're going to see classic Van Meter just dominating their way through their season again. This is going to be a closer game than what it's been in the past few matchups. Des Moines Christian has a lot of speed, both at running back and outside, so they can use that speed to their advantage, playing to the boundaries a little bit. But last week, you're playing against Underwood, another one of the top teams in the class, and I'm not worried about how Underwood looked last week, I guess. Like, even though they only put up 7 points against Van Meter, I'm not worried about how they looked. Van Meter gets a great win, 17-7 over Underwood last week. And I think it's just we're not at the point yet where we're going to pick against Van Meter, I think.
Yes.
I think Van Meter wins this game. Des Moines Christian has the ability to give them some problems with what they can do on offense, but I think Van Meter does win this game.
Tell you what, I'm just kind of looking through these games to see if we have a ton of 1-0 versus 1-0 teams this week, and there are not many. I mean, it's just not a lot of 0-1 versus 0-1 teams, or 1-0 versus 1-0. Here's a 1-0 versus 1-0 game. Sioux Central, the Rebels, take on Cherokee Washington or the Braves, I should say. This is a quarterback versus quarterback game. Owen Mills of Sioux Central, 3 of 5, 44 yards, 190 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. Jackson Paulsrud, 1 of 4, 60 yards passing, but 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. Let's take a look at the defenses here. Well, yeah, pretty good. MMCRU was Cherokee Washington's win, 37-8. South O'Brien was the win for Sioux Central, 32-8. I don't know. This could be a good game, actually, just kind of looking at how both teams run. Sioux Central ran for 524 yards. Oh, my goodness. All right, well, I don't know. This could be a fun game.
You know, your 524 yards, that's not something you're going to go out and you're going to expect to do every single week. And that's not something you can expect to sustain going into every single game. But then you look at the other side, Cherokee Washington did very similar stuff to what Sioux Central did last week. They did very similar things to each other. And so the matchup does end up being very fun this week. Both defenses look good. They both only gave up 8 points last week.
They got 2 good. Cherokee is a good running back. I mean, dang.
Both offenses score in the 30s. Both defenses keep the other team single digits. The game looks very good on paper going into this week. I guess we'll see how much of the running games can be sustained going against a new look opponent this week against what they both blew up last week. But we'll see which team can sustain the running game that they have last week more this week, and that will be the team that wins the game.
4 interceptions for Cherokee on defense. Boy, you talk about a 50-50 toss-up. I couldn't tell you who's going to win this game.
I think
I lean Sioux Central, but
the one key thing about this game is you look last week, Sioux Central didn't turn over the ball once. Cherokee Washington threw the 1 pick. 1 turnover in a game like this, that's such a toss-up, can really decide an entire game. And so I guess slight lean Sioux Central maybe, but really
I would, but now I'm looking at last year's game. Jackson Paulsrud was obviously still the quarterback for Sioux Central. Owen Mills was still the running back, or was still the quarterback for Sioux Central, and it's 50-0. So I'm actually going to change. I'll go Cherokee. Unless they lost a lot in the trenches, but yeah. I'll go Cherokee Washington. So there we go. Fun. That's our 2A games. Let's move to 1A, not A, 1A. Let me click on that. Oh, my goodness. All right. Class A, AHSTW versus Riverside is our game of the week in Class 1A. We got a quarterback battle. Actually, it's a quarterback versus running back battle. So for AHSTW, Camden Suckup, 12 of 22, 158 yards passing, and then he ran for 126 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then Jackson Gordon of Riverside, 15 carries, 185 yards, 4 touchdowns for the Bulldog, the junior Bulldog. Also, Riverside has a wide receiver by the name of AC Roller. That might be the best name in the state. This is gonna be a good game. Riverside dominates West Monona 68-0, and AHSTW holds off Tri-Center 26-21. AHSTW won this game last year 41-7.
And really, if you look at it, it's a lot like the game that we just talked about between Sioux Central and Cherokee Washington, where both teams looked great on offense last week. Obviously, Tri-Center's a better team than West Monona is, and you're not going to put up 68 points every single week if you're Riverside, but you have to feel good about what you're doing going into a bigger matchup this week. And you're going to find it as a common theme when we get to the smaller schools. The teams are going to be randomly having these close to 400-yard rush games, but it's which team can sustain that when they're actually playing against the other heavy hitters from their class, or maybe you play a team, the class above you, and it's which team can sustain that a little bit more. And Riverside looks good. Can they sustain it against a much better team? And AHSTW obviously played against a much better team last week. They have the experience of that. And I think they'll come out and win a game this week against Riverside, who's riding high. But based on last year, based on how they look to start the year, you get an impressive win over Tri-Center versus just a win against West Monona. I think I would lean towards AHSTW.
10-2 AHSTW is over Riverside since 2008. Make it 10-3. I think Riverside wins against AHSTW. I like the Bulldogs. I like the ground attack. I think it'll be a good game. It'll be a close game, but I like them in a game like that. So good to see it. Scrolling through here, Woodward Granger takes on Pleasantville. Just quick thoughts on this one for me. Woodward Granger gets the big win over Madrid. Boy, that was like one of those. Wow. And Pleasantville's good. I mean, had great stats. Fell short to I-35, 27-14. Keep an eye on that one. Western Christian versus Hinton. I know Western Christian won their game last week. Hinton did as well. Caden Van Regemorter, 7 of 15, 89 yards and a touchdown. I tell you what, I had Western Christian as one of my dome teams. They took care of business, beat Boyden Hull Rock Valley. And then Hinton defeats Galen Catholic 21-0. Keep an eye on Gabe Anderson, quarterback/running back for Hinton in that one. Be a big one to circle. Ian, what else do we got here for 1A? I'm just kind of scrolling through here.
Let's look around here.
Dyke New Hartford takes on West Branch. Dyke New Hartford, a shocker last week, falling short to Grundy Center. Wapsie Valley Denver is always a good game. OABCID.
I think Trainer looks good again. They get Tri-Center this week. Obviously, we just talked about Tri-Center a little bit. They lost a close one last week to AHSTW, but they didn't look bad in a loss. How good AHSTW is still unknown a little bit. I will know more about these teams in 3-4 weeks time, but obviously Trainer looked good last week. Tri-Center looked okay. I guess that could be a closer game. Two teams that play each other often, though, will probably be a fun one.
Lake Mills and Central Springs, a game between two 1-0s. Another battle of the running backs. Landon Price, 8 carries, 179 yards last week. Avery Gregory, 21 carries, 157 yards for him last week. Should be a good game. Both these teams do not pass the ball well at all, so expect a lot of ground and pound. Central Springs beat Newman Catholic 50-34. Lake Mills shuts out AGWSR 20-0. I like Lake Mills in that one. I think that'll be a good game.
Yeah, I would agree, and I would lean towards Lake Mills first look at the game. I guess it's one that you could see going either way. Central Springs has won the last couple games against Lake Mills, but based on last week, I would lean towards Lake Mills based on how explosive their offense was able to look at times. They were able to hit on some big plays and weren't just, consistent ground and pound all the way down the field, taking a bunch of time off the clock. They were able to show off some explosiveness, even though it wasn't consistent. They had a very inconsistent attack on offense, but the big playability, I think, would make me lean towards Lake Mills.
Class A, our Class A game of the week. ACGC, the Chargers taking on the Earlham Cardinals. Blake Reynolds of Earlham, 5 of 9, 73 yards, 2 carries, 25 touchdowns, 25 yards and 1 touchdown. Jathan South of ACGC. How about this? Oh my gosh, 5 of 5, 129 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. And then he ran for 137 yards and 3 touchdowns. Caleb Smith of Earlham ran for 237 yards and 3 touchdowns. So 2 teams that can pass the ball if need be, but they really rely on the run game. 401 yards rushing for Earlham, 402 for ACGC. Earlham defeats Central Decatur 41-12. Ogden beat ACGC beat Ogden 40-0. I think I got to roll with the Chargers here. I think Jathan South is so talented, and I really love the Chargers defense.
Yeah, and first things first, you're not going to see many quarterbacks that have 100% next to their name going into week 2, and he's able to say that he does. But I'm also going to slight lean to the Chargers on this one. Emphasis on the slight lean. I think they will win this game against Earlham. I don't feel super confident saying that, but I think they will win this game against Earlham. And the balanced attack mostly coming from Jonathan South, but it's a pretty balanced attack in what they're able to do. I'm going to roll with them over Earlham this week.
Danville will take on Highland. Danville falls just short to Linville-Sully, 30-22. Those are my boys. I was very high on Danville. Highland defeats North Cedar 26-0. Keep an eye on that game. I think it'll be a really good one. Kingsley-Pearson, Logan-Magnolia. That's a game, 2 1-0 teams that have the same exact logo. That's a pass-heavy game. I think Landon Howie and Ashton Pezulik, a sophomore, 2 very talented quarterbacks. Boy, Pezulik threw for 4 touchdowns. How about that? And they ran the ball well. I like Logan-Magnolia in this one, just kind of looking at it.
2 pass-heavy teams is not something you'll see often.
No, especially in Class A.
Low classes, yes.
I think we both agree Logan-Magnolia is the favorite there, but Kingsley-Pearson got the win over Alto Aurelia. That was a 13-8 win. So good for those guys. Madrid will take on Martinsdale St. Mary's. Madrid will try to recover after the week 1 loss. So definitely one of those that you have to kind of circle and be like, hey, time to rally the troops a little bit. Linville-Sully taking on North Mahaska. A nice little battle of counties right next to each other and schools that are close to each other. Linville-Sully's Landon Montgomery, 20 of 31, 314 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. He ran for 61 yards and 1 touchdown. And then Lucas Nunakoven, 11 of 17, 130 yards, 3 touchdowns, 69 rushing yards, and 1 touchdown. This is going to be, let me look at defense. Oh my gosh, North Mahaska had 5 interceptions on defense in the win over Eddyville, Blakesburg, Fremont. Linville-Sully dominated this game last year, but keep an eye on those Warhawks, Ian. This could be closer than some people think. Yep.
Both turned over the ball 2 times last week, so obviously North Mahaska got a bunch of turnovers to go their way last week, but neither offense, you turn the ball over multiple times in a game. You don't look great. You're not happy about that, no matter who you are. So I guess it does look fairly even going into the week. both run games look good, not great compared to other offenses, but they do have a very balanced attack because these are two teams that will throw the ball better than your average Class A school does. Linville solely beats Danville last week, a team that you're very high on. And I think they carry that into this week, and Linville solely ends up winning this game too.
It's going to be a fun week in Class A. My computer is dying quickly, and my charger is off somewhere else. So we're going to go through 8-player here we're not going to go as in deep, but we're still going to kind of move it along here and just kind of go through what we think is going to happen. Glidden-Ralston, who another team I was very high on, will take on Arweva. Colby Wallace struggled last week for Glidden-Ralston in the loss to Woodbine 58-0, and then it was Arweva with the victory 34-0 over Azaria EHK. This was a 25-24 game last year. Just kind of looking through this one real quick. Oh man, as much as I was high on Glidden-Ralston, I think Arweva could take the victory here.
I'm gonna lean the exact same way. Go with Arweva. Glidden-Ralston, you can't throw the ball for 10 yards and expect to win some football games. It's just not going to happen. No matter how hard you try to win that game or how well your running attack is going, you can't have no passing threat and expect to win games going into every single week. And with that being said, I think it's another close game, just like last year's game was, but I'm going to lean towards Arweva.
Audubon-Colonesco, the Royals are 2-0. Brecken-Klatt is running the rock really well. 300 yards this season so far. This is the third game of the year Colonesco has played, so their stats are a little off. Jack Angel passing the ball for Audubon with Carson Wessel on the backside. That'll be a good one between those two programs. I think Audubon wins. Quick pick on that. What do you think?
Colonesco hasn't given up a point yet this year. So I guess that's momentum carrier going into future games. Obviously, they've played 2 games, which is more than most teams, but they're not against the best opponents. But with momentum carrying so high, you see the passing game isn't there as much as you'd want it to be. The rushing attack looks great. You'd like to see him balance out the attack a little bit more, but the defense looks great. They're riding on 2 great weeks, obviously shutouts the last 2 weeks. So I'll give Colonesco the benefit of the doubt. I'll say they come up with a good win against Audubon in a game that was a very close game last year.
Our 8-player game of the week, Boyer Valley at 2-0 takes on Woodbine at 1-0. Boyer Valley so far this season has run the ball well, 553 rushing yards. They don't pass the ball really at all. Woodbine has a 4-star wide receiver in Landon Bloom. I think Boyer Valley, keep an eye on this one because I don't think the Dogs will go down lightly here against the Tigers.
With that being said, I don't think they'll go down lightly either, but I'm going to go with Woodbine, and I'm going to go with Woodbine fairly big in this game. I think they win this game by a few scores. I think their attack with having Bloom on the outside is just a bit too much for teams that you're going to see them go against in 8-man football. I think Bloom quite literally himself just is a difference maker in a smaller game with less guys on the field. And I like the way that they're able to balance their attack as well on the ground. Brody Pryor ran for almost 100 yards last week, had 2 touchdowns himself. I think they will continue to carry on what they did last week. I think they win this game by a few scores.
And finally, Iowa Valley, 2-0, takes on Waco at 2-0. Nolan Kriegel versus Clayton Miller. Clayton Miller has been phenomenal. 28 of 44, 496 yards passing and 10 touchdowns. And then what else can he say about Nolan Kriegel? I mean, the kid is on fire. He's got 13 touchdowns already this year, 10 rushing touchdowns. In 2 games, Iowa Valley has run for 724 passing yards. I am going to roll with Iowa Valley to outshoot Waco.
I mean, this is just another one. Like, you look at it, and they're doing fairly identical things to what they're the other team is doing.
Waco's
Obviously,
defense has not done great, though.
No, but that being said, Iowa Valley's hasn't either. They gave up 67 points in the first week. Iowa Valley has the much better, significantly better rushing attack, which I guess you could slightly lean towards their way going into this game. But I think Clayton Miller, the way that he's looked for Waco at quarterback, they've had 2 consistent offensive games. Obviously, Iowa Valley has as well. They've both put up a lot of points. It'll come down to the defenses, which defense really wants it more, because both defenses have had some performances that they probably aren't too happy about, like with Waco giving up 46 last week, Iowa Valley giving up 67 the first week, really a toss-up going into this week. But because you went with Iowa Valley, I'll go with Waco.
There you go. All right, well, that leaves us one more before my battery dies, and I'll have to switch over once we finish recording here, but I don't want to leave my setup. Iowa and Iowa State. Keep an eye on this one, the Cy-Hawk game. Also, quick shout-out, 8 players, Springville and Central City. That's the battle for the tractor. That's a fun little trophy game. Iowa and Iowa State. I'm a Hawkeye fan, so I'm going to roll with Iowa. I think Iowa wins. I could go into so much more depth, but I'm going to go Iowa, and I'll go final score 24-10. I don't think it's going to be a slog. I don't think it's going to be a 10-7 game.
I would agree that it's not going to be a 10-7 game like it's been. An Iowa State fan, so you will not hear me pick Iowa, no matter how much I do or don't believe in Iowa State going into the week. You won't hear the words coming out of my mouth that Iowa will win this game. I don't know about I've seen a lot of people picking Iowa by 14 points, 17 points, saying that they're going to win this game by multiple scores. I think one team will win the game by 6 or 7 points. I'm going to say it's Iowa State, because you won't hear me say it's Iowa, but I don't feel great about it.
There you go. All right, that's all we got from us. Make sure to tune in to Jack's show tomorrow night during Friday Night Lights. If you're not at a game, he'll be kind of doing an NFL Red Zone style, kind of going through the games as they go. I think I'll hop on with him at 10 o'clock tomorrow night once I get back from calling Waukee and Waukee Northwest, and we'll just kind of go from there, recap the games. And then Paul will be posting, and Ian might be helping. We don't know. We'll just have to see what everybody's up to. And, yeah. That's all we got. Ian, thanks for joining me this week. We appreciate it. We'll have to get you back on.
It was a great time.
Yep. There you go. Appreciate it. We'll keep track of all your picks and all. I'm just kidding. We won't do that. But everybody in their minds will say that. So. All right, Ian. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. And we will see you next time. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
See you in week 3.
Yeah, we'll see you in week 3. Thank you for watching. See you next time.